I'm not actually going to speak that much. I just want to introduce our two speakers that are going to welcome you today. First is the tireless, inspirational Dean of Harvard Law School, Dean Martha Minow. We're thrilled to have you. She has taught here since 1981 and is an expert in human rights with a focus on members of racial and religious minorities and women, children, and persons with disabilities. She does amazing work, and in addition to being an inspirational leader of the law school, she's had the vision to lead this school to be a national leader in food law and policy by supporting our program and others at the law school working in the food arena. And she has seen from the beginning how important food is to social justice, to hunger relief, to the environment, and to our law students who are involved in our program. So Dean Minow, thank you for your tremendous support of our work and for joining us this morning.
Good morning. This is so exciting. I can tell you that the first day has already blown the roof off this building. And I know that today there will be ideas and plans that will make the world so much better. The energy and the creativity represented by the people in this room is already changing the world and will do so concretely. Maybe I didn't understand food and food waste until I met Emily, but I do now. And you know, and I don't need to tell you, but I want you to know that I know that 40% of the United States food supply goes to waste. I mean, think about that, 40%. And it costs the average family in this country between $1,500 and $2,200 a year. I'm on the board of the Legal Services Corporation. I spend a lot of my time working with low-income families. We need to get these causes together, let me tell you that. But what's also been so illustrative and illuminating for me is the way in which the issues of access to food and economic sensibility, efficiency, connect with so many other issues. Sustainability, respecting those people who work in the food industry, animal rights. And if we needed to be reminded that this is the right thing to be doing, seeing the numbers of important causes that come together is such an underscoring and a reason to be reminded. The definition of reduce and recover, just in case you hadn't looked them up, I looked them up. So reduce, we all know, means to make smaller, but it also means to change a substance to a new form, like, let's look at the lava reduced to dust, or to present a problem in its most basic form. And I think that that's a great takeaway for us. We're talking about how to present the problems in their most basic form. Recover, of course, means to get something back, but it also means to return to a normal state after a period of difficulty, like illness, to recover. And I think that's another great definition to hold on to. It's about getting to the healthy state. So reduce and recover, the mission here is to present the problem in a basic form so that we can get to a healthy state. I am so thrilled that this law school can be a leader because of Robert Greenwald, because of Emily Broadleaf, because of everyone on the team. And the transformation here is genuine. You heard yesterday that the food here for this conference is recovered food, that the excess of the commencement food this year was donated to Cambridge-based food recovery organization, Food for Free, a fantastic organization. And in addition, what we're finding is that the students, some of whom are here, interns are here, are teaching us, because they get it. They get it more than some of us old people do. And so the Food Law Society, the Food Law Lab have been central. I was thrilled to lead a university-wide challenge, challenging the whole university in conjunction with our innovation lab to come up with better solutions for food security and food safety. I think that the prospects for innovation and actual policy reform and collaboration have never been as great as they are right now in any area, but especially in this one, because young people get it. I want to particularly thank the EPA, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, for joining here to co-sponsor this conference. Again, if we needed to be reminded about the significance of this issue, look at the environmental lens. It is central. Sustainability, and the involvement of the FDA and USDA. If we can join all the alphabet organizations of the federal government, we can do anything. So it is with, great delight and excitement that I look forward to what I know you will do here today, which is come up with even more concrete next steps, even more ways that individual states and organizations can leverage and scale up the great work that's happening. When I was in Hong Kong not long ago, trying to describe what we think is important, what we're trying to do, trying to learn from people there, I mentioned this work. It's all anybody wanted to talk about. This is a global issue, and it's the time for this issue. So thank you for your work, and I look forward to what you'll do today.
Thank you for that. Thank you again for being here. It means so much to have you and to have your support. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Beeling from EPA Region 1 here in Boston. Chris has been an incredible partner to our clinic, even before this conference, working on projects all throughout Massachusetts and New England. And this conference has been a pleasure to plan together. Even though it's a lot of work, we've enjoyed it a lot. And I'm very excited to figure out what our next endeavors and work will be. You've been a great partner in crime. So Chris is going to give another welcome for today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So as Emily said, I'm Chris Beeling from EPA New England. We like to be specify where we're from, and I work with the 6 New England states, many of which are represented here and great partners on this issue and really leaders in the country, so thank you for them. I also have folks from our Philadelphia office, from our New York City office, from our Washington, D.C. office here as well, so it's not just me. It was really a team of EPA folks that helped put this meeting together, and again, just the overwhelming response, I can't thank you enough. We were lucky enough to I was lucky enough to literally run into Gina McCarthy, our administrator, going in a door last Monday. And I had asked her to give a welcome here in person, and she could not join us. And for those of you who don't know Gina, you'll get to meet her in a minute. She is really passionate about this issue. And she takes such hits on the regulatory side of EPA that this is voluntary. We call ourselves carrots, right? We're not sticks. And it's really a great place to be sitting. So Gina will give us a welcome, which I think has more impact than mine, and I really want to share it with you. So here she comes. And tell me, anyone here have met Gina McCarthy? Okay. I heard a buzz that you didn't hear enough Boston accents at this conference. About to change. Oh, the wrong one. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wrong one. How did that happen? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gina McCarthy. Welcome to Harvard Law School's Reduce and Recover, Save Food for People conference. I wish I could be there in person, but I wanted to share my sincere thanks to Harvard's Food Law and Policy Clinic, the Massachusetts DEP, and Recycling Works Massachusetts for co-sponsoring this event with EPA. I also want to personally thank each of you for your dedication to reducing the amount of good food that goes to waste in the United States. Today, 48 million Americans, including 15 million kids, are struggling with hunger. At the same time, nearly a third of all the food we produce in America goes uneaten, and much of it ends up in landfills where it can harm our environment. We can do better. Last September, USDA and EPA announced a new goal to cut food loss and waste in our country in half by 2030. Businesses and communities are taking innovative steps to achieve our goal, and they're saving money, helping the environment, and feeding hungry people in the process. States like Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island are showing tremendous leadership in making sure good food does not go to waste. We want to keep up this momentum. That's why we're releasing a new call to action report highlighting creative solutions to cut waste across all segments of the food system. Everyone has a role to play in making sure healthy food feeds people, not landfills. So the conversations you're having today couldn't be more important. I wish you all the best in your discussions, and I look forward to hearing about the ideas you generate together.
Great. Well, thank you to Gina. So apologies to California. I did write the part of the talking points, and I didn't give good credit to the folks outside of New England. But California is also doing some amazing work on the state level here. So I really want to leave the message that Gina left and Doug Rao left, and I keep hearing over and over again, is what can you do on Monday, right? What can you do on Monday? So I want to just reiterate, we have asked you to join working groups today. Many of you participated yesterday. We asked you to come back to those working groups. We're going to report out on those at the very end of the conference, and we hope you stay for that. And really, in those working groups, we're trying to come up with some really concrete recommendations, how to keep the momentum going, how to keep those working groups going, how to keep those issues going. And we really are relying on you all to do that with us. So with that, I think I'd like to turn it over to the plenary group. If you'd like to come up and join me while we introduce Danielle, that would be great to save a little bit of time. We're pretty good on time today, so we'll try to keep that going. So with that, Danielle is our moderator, and I have never met Danielle in person, though I have seen her images a zillion times in the ether. Danielle Nierenberg is from Food Tank, a not-for-profit organization that just started in 2013, and that kind of blows my mind because the following that you have and the presence that you have is just remarkable. So thank you for your work, and I can't wait to hear more about that. It's really staggering. Staggering, and I get a blast from you almost every day. And they're wonderful, wonderful images. And all of you, thank you for the social media that you've been promoting for the event as well. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Danielle to lead this exemplary panel this morning and to kick off our event. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm really so excited to be here. It's a huge honor. As Congresswoman Pingree said yesterday, it's incredible to be in a room with so many amazing people who are working so hard on this issue. And I want to thank Emily again and her colleagues and her entire team for really putting this together. I think she deserves another round of applause. Woo! And I want to also thank all of you for being here, especially on the second day of this conference. You, all of you, the folks in this room, are really at the forefront of the endeavor to not only make wonky fruit and vegetables the norm in restaurants, cafeterias, hospitals, and other institutions across the country, but to ensure that all the hard work that farmers and farm laborers put into producing and harvesting food doesn't go to waste. And what's most exciting to me personally, as someone who's been following this issue for a while, is that businesses, policymakers, research centers, and maybe most importantly, the funding and donor communities are finally taking notice. And that's because of all of you who have been at the front lines, some of you for many, many, many years, to create awareness about the environmental, social, and economic impacts of food loss and food waste. And I think everyone in this room also understands that this, didn't come about by accident. It was because of partnerships and collaborations and really, really hard work. And sometimes, as we all know, collaborations are very easy and they seem like no-brainers. But to get where we need to go, ultimately, it's the unlikely alliances that will make the difference, and that's really what today's panel is about. Who are the unusual suspects that we need to engage with, and what have been the challenges and opportunities that result from sometimes really uncomfortable conversations with people we don't necessarily agree with? We all know that preaching to the choir doesn't make change, which is, I think, something our panelists know a lot about. What I will plan to do is introduce each of our panelists briefly, although I feel like they don't really need introductions because they're such rock stars in this movement. And then each of them has some short videos that they'll show, and then we'll launch into a question from me. What I am hoping is that we can make this panel very interactive and a conversation among the panelists as well as all of you in the audience. So sometimes, with my work as the president of Food Tank, I'm asked to moderate a lot of panels. And sometimes, I worry that, the panel won't be talkative. Sometimes really smart people can be very, quiet. I am not worried about that with this panel, not at all. Exactly. and I can say very genuinely that I know and admire each of these people in extreme ways. I can't say enough about their work and what they've done to propel this issue forward. There are two heroes up here, and there's a heroine, and these are amazing food waste leaders, and they also deserve another round of applause, I think, for their efforts. Their bios are in the programs, and I don't want to read them and bore you with that. And again, they're pretty well known, so I think you know a lot about them. What I'd like to do is just say a few personal words about each of them. First, it's my sincere pleasure to introduce Dana Gunders, a senior scientist at the Natural Resources Defense Council. I've known Dana for several years now, and this is a woman who has no time for BS. She is one of the greatest doers and thinkers on food waste, and it's been an honor, a real honor, to learn from her and the work she's done. I also can't figure out how she juggles everything she does, from having a family to coming to conferences like this to writing and research, being on the news, and doing everything else that she does. Next, I'm excited to introduce Tristram Stewart, who is an author, activist, and the founder of Feedback. I first started chatting with him in either 2009 or 2010, I can't remember. And I kept thinking to myself while I was on a Skype conversation with him, I'm like, who is this crazy Brit who wants us to eat like weird-looking fruits and vegetables and throws these big parties? So but it's been really exciting and one of the great pleasures of my career to watch how his work and his organizations have grown so quick and made so much impact over the last few years. And last but not least, I'm happy to introduce Jesse Fink, who is first and foremost an entrepreneur, but he is also an incredible mentor and benefactor. With his wife Betsy, who is also an amazing trailblazer, the Fink Family Foundation is leading the charge against food waste in the funding and donor community. I also feel like Jesse is probably one of those people who you could call at 3 in the morning with a crazy idea about how to tackle this problem, and not only would he take the phone call, but he'd talk you through it and give you some ideas about how to do it. So again, thank you to all of our panelists. Again, they have some very short videos to show, and we're going to start with a video from Jesse, and then we'll launch into some questions.
This has never been shown except for
Did you know that every year Americans spend nearly $220 billion growing, processing, and transporting over 60 million tons of food that's never eaten? We're wasting 400 pounds of food per person, while 1 in 7 Americans is at risk of going hungry. On farms, fruits and vegetables are left in the dirt because they're not visually perfect. In restaurants and grocery stores, extra food is purchased just to keep buffets and shelves looking full before being tossed. And in homes, confusing expiration dates lead families to pour perfectly good milk down the drain. If all this wasted food were grown in one place, this mega farm would cover over 3/4 of California. Growing this food consumes over 20% of our national water supply, and once it ends up in a landfill, it's a major contributor to climate change. Well, it's time for a solution. A national study by ReFed, a multi-stakeholder nonprofit committed to reducing U.S. food waste, reveals huge financial, social, and environmental opportunities hiding under all this waste. ReFed's roadmap shows how we can take steps now to reduce food waste by 20% nationwide, reaping benefits of over $100 billion. all of the solutions fit into the broad categories of prevention, recovery, and recycling. Prevention means avoiding food waste from ever happening through solutions like standardized date labeling, consumer education, smaller plates in restaurants, and trayless dining at buffets. These will allow us to buy what we need, store it efficiently, and keep from throwing out perfectly good food, saving businesses and families $8 billion a year. Recovery means we can save unsold food and encourage food bank donations through effective policy, tax incentives, and business education, which will double the meals donated to families in need each year. Some food scraps are inevitable, but recycling allows us to turn them into a valuable resource through composting and anaerobic digestion, which will produce an additional 2 million tons of compost annually, as well as a reliable source of energy for cities and trucks. Solving the food waste problem will require our commitment to 4 paths of action: new financing to scale proven solutions, common sense policy change, adopting of emerging innovations, and consumer and employee education. To learn more about how to cut waste, boost the economy, reduce hunger, and help the environment, get involved and visit refed.com today.
So Jesse, obviously ReFed was a huge initiative and brought together so many different stakeholders. Can you talk about that process and how it came about and sort of the work that was behind it?
Sure. Well, thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me. And Emily, thank you. The video got done last week, and we've all been working on it for the last couple of months and thought that this might be a great place to show it. If you have comments about it, maybe see me or some of the other folks here. Perhaps we could do an edit. But ReFed, well, I first would like to introduce, this is my wife, Betsy Fink, who's right here. Who is a farmer, and together in our foundation really has been the inspiration behind food waste. I'm just the mouthpiece at the moment, but it's really been Betsy. ReFed is a multi-stakeholder collaboration, and I'm sitting here now. Sarah Varid was really the person who was the champion and pulled it all together for months, and Adam Ryan, who's there. Adam, will you stand up for a second? But it is multi-stakeholder, and so I would like to try something here and see if it works. If I could ask anyone who has been involved in ReFed as part of the advisory council, if you would stand up. If you've been a funder, if you would stand up and stay up, please stay up, thank you. If you were involved in reviewing the whole roadmap as it was happening, please stand up. If you went to the, you can stand up, you need to stand up. Yeah. If you went to the launch that was out in San Francisco, please stand up. And if you've been down in DC, for the event that we had about a month ago, including visiting different Congress people in the White House, if you'd please stand up. So this is, you can see when we talk about multi-stakeholder, I just happen to have the microphone. Well, no, don't stand up, because I want everybody to stand up. If everybody could stand up, please, everybody stand up. Just, yeah. Thank you. Because that's what this is all about. You know, this is, I just happen to have the microphone here, and we were involved in getting this started, but really, I guess we could sit down, thank you. But what ReFed, I think we happen to be here at the right time to help catalyze all of the work that all of you have been doing individually and collectively for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and more. So, it's an honor to be up here, but any of you could be up here doing the same thing. With ReFed, it was important for us to be multi-stakeholder because we felt that we wanted to create a roadmap, and it is a physical report. I think if you've seen it, you can go to the website, or this is a pretty impressive 90-page report, and there's a 80-page technical appendix afterwards that Adam will answer any of those questions. And then this is a shorter version, which is an executive summary. And then the video is even shorter, and part of the reason for the video is after spending a lot of time down in D.C., we realized that this is such a complex issue, as all of you know, that what are the different visuals that we can use to make it happen. But it is the fact that it is multi-stakeholder, the folks who came together to do the research and then to analyze the data and then to really beat it up and provide insights to it, come from every sector you can imagine, starting with farmers and different types of farmers. As we found out, you know, an almond or walnut farmer is very different than a dairy farmer and a produce farmer. We had farmers, we had businesses all throughout the supply chain. So when we talk about unlikely alliances, thinking about a business that is involved in the food supply, but then a company like Waste Management, which is involved in hauling and getting them to sit around the table. We were so fortunate to have various different forms of government, different aspects of the federal government who are represented here, which amazing, and local government and municipalities. We had entrepreneurs who have been involved in wasted food solutions who were actually living practitioners. We had, and continue to have, I shouldn't say had, because we started with a group and now that group has expanded. But nonprofits, Dana so involved, and Joanne on the steering committee, and WRI very involved. And then the other alliances, which maybe normally wouldn't show up as much, were investors. And investors, philanthropic funders, who are investors, you know, the folks who are here in the room, the Rockefeller Foundation, very large investor in food solutions. They're investing in you, in the different nonprofit organizations. And then investors who want to invest in solutions and startup solutions, in venture capital and private equity and project finance. So it was truly a multi-stakeholder, and I think that's what has led to the acceptance of ReFed, especially down in Washington, D.C., so that when we show up, we represent many, many constituents who have given their input into the roadmap. Who wasn't included? I don't know if that was part of the question, or
Maybe we can get into that later.
okay,
since-
great. So let me stop
Yeah.
and say thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So Dana, I think everyone knows that NRDC worked very closely with the Ad Council on a series of PSAs. So we're going to show the next video.
Yeah, for those of you who came to the consumer thing, you get to see it again. But it's only 2 minutes. I don't know how we do that. Oh, you're right there. Great. I should have known. They're all over everything. So for those of you who don't know, the Ad Council, while they're getting it, oh, go ahead.
Oh, my sweet baby, you mean everything to me. I love you.
Can we get strawberries?
No, honey.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you. So the question is similar to the one I asked Jesse. How did this come about? What was sort of the process of getting involved with the Ad Council? And we can talk about tensions later, but, describe the process.
Okay. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know the Ad Council, they are essentially the nonprofit arm of the advertising industry, and they take on public service campaigns. So they did things like Smokey the Bear, Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk, the Crash Test Dummies, the crying Native American. So the process is that they select, you have to kind of apply to them, and they select different causes. And I will tell you that there was a woman at NRDC who was on one of their stakeholder committees, and we were brainstorming one day, and she said, what about the Ad Council? She said, about 100 people at NRDC have asked me to approach the Ad Council with something, save the whales or the energy efficiency or something, and I refuse to do it because I know they won't do it, but I think they might just do this one. So we applied, and lo and behold, they actually said it was the shortest deliberation of their board ever to take this issue on. And they've been really excited about it ever since. And they actually have a professional ad agency develop the campaign pro bono, and then they go out and they send it out to 33,000 media outlets who are given the option to show this, or outside you can see the print and the billboards and the bus stops and some of the other components of the campaign, and they show it in donated space. And a typical campaign garners about $30 million per year on average in donated media space. We're hoping to blow that out of the water, by the way, and the way that we want to do that is by engaging a lot of non-media partners like yourselves, people in cities, people at universities, other people who can think of ways that they want to use the assets we put out. So if you want to talk about that, please see me. But I will tell you, that ad took 16 months to come up with. And in terms of kind of processes and unlikely alliances, they did a lot of research. They went into people's homes and watched them shop, and really tried to get at what's the root cause of why people are wasting food. And what they came up with was people, wasting food is a byproduct of good intentions. So, you want to host a really good party, you want to start to cook, you want to try a new recipe, you want to feed your kids fresh food, whatever it is. You go out, you have these great aspirations when you're at the store, and then life happens over the rest of the week, and all of a sudden you're throwing food out. So they wanted to make sure to preserve that good intention with the campaign and not make people feel really bad. At the same time, their second kind of conclusion was that nobody realizes they're wasting food, and we need some kind of wake-up call, and we need to kind of have that punch to it all that wakes them up that this is happening. So that's kind of how the campaign can be. And just a quick little funny story is that the whole Lime Love connection that you may have seen, when they first showed this to us, we were like, can we take that part out? And this is after, 14 of the 16 months that we spent on this. And we had this battle with the ad agency because everyone at NRDC who saw it was just like, that's weird. That's just distracting, and it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't finish. And they were like, we absolutely have to keep that in because otherwise this is boring. Mm-hmm. And that's funny, and people will laugh, and they will remember it. They probably won't remember anything else, and it'll make it stick. And I have to say, now that I've seen this a zillion times, it's I like it more every single time. So the whole unlikely alliance thing, working with the advertising industry, oh my God, it is another world. And interesting. They work on different schedules and use different lingo and have different opinions, but I think it's been really productive so far, and we're excited to see where it goes.
Excellent. You actually have one more minute, so I'm going to ask you another question. Can you talk about the response? How has your communications team handled that? What's been the response on Twitter and Facebook and everything else?
Well, in a way, it's a little anticlimactic because it launches, and you sort of put it forward on social, and you can get that response. But the sort of reaching the masses and getting on. So this will be shown on TV, hopefully, and the billboards and bus stops and things, that takes months to really like get up. So hopefully, Anna's here from San Diego. Hopefully we're going to be seeing it on their waste trucks if everything works out. But that takes 4 months. So it's been a little anticlimactic for me. The video itself, it got 1 million views on YouTube as of a couple weeks ago. So that was exciting, I think. And then strangely, this publisher on Facebook called The Dark Side picked up the video, put like black bars around it, and put "This will change how you think about food," and posted it. And he got 10 million views. And I don't know who he is or what they do, but anyways, we'll take it.
An unlikely
and
alliance.
50,000 likes and like 3,000 comments. And so those are the kinds of people. And I guess I just want to say, to Jesse's point around kind of multi-stakeholder and everyone here in the room, it's not actually a platitude to say that everyone in the room here is like part of this movement and taking it out there, because it may feel like for some people that you're talking to the same people all the time, but you can all go out into your own communities and you can assemble another amazing group that is an unlikely alliance of, your Department of Sanitation, your grocery stores, your students, everything. I mean, and people, the reason we did this campaign is that we know that when people start to think about this, they really get it, they really grasp onto it, they really want to change. And it's just a matter of, having some initiators in all communities that can go out and make that happen.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'd seen all the other videos, but I haven't seen the next one from Tristram. So can we cue that up?
Do we trust him?
No. What?
Do we trust him? I haven't seen it yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, Big Ben is sounding 12 o'clock. Welcome to Feeding the 5,000.
Well, Feeding the 5,000 is about a really good partnership between a number of organisations to really try and raise awareness of the issue of food waste, both from retailers, from consumers, from a whole range of people.
We want to feed 5,000 people, but we also want to feed you with food that would otherwise be waste. The food that you're being offered today is stuff that goes into landfill. It's perfectly acceptable, it's good grub, but what we have got is we've got stuff that the supermarkets say no to, the consumers say no to.
In this country, we waste so much surplus fit for consumption food, and it should be going to people.
With our population increase, we're getting to the point that food wastage is ridiculous, especially in the UK.
Yeah, hopefully things like this will raise awareness and stop food waste in the future.
Friends of the Earth are here to demonstrate how much food that can't be used for humans can be used for animals. So we've got some live pigs that we're actually feeding the waste from apple pressing today. Visitors here today are getting to drink the apple juice, and then the pressed apples are actually being fed to our pigs as well. So it's there to demonstrate a much more efficient way of using food, so it doesn't go to waste.
16 million tonnes of food waste are being thrown away every year in Britain.
For the average family, they could save £50 a month simply by making the most of the food they buy.
The vegetables that are being used for lunch are funky, all right? Cosmetically, there are issues, but they are fresh and very tasty.
All these carrots are not suitable for supermarkets, wrong size, wrong shape. We're just highlighting unnecessary waste of food here today, getting people to help bag stuff up. Then we can deliver it off to our charities.
I've been a freegan for 30 years. Such a crazy world that we live in at the moment, with so much food wastage and so much starvation in the other parts of the planet.
We need to all respond to this by saying, look, the global food waste scandal, whereby we waste a third of the entire world's food supply, is something that we can solve. It's causing environmental destruction, it's contributing to global hunger. But the solutions are delicious, and that involves eating and enjoying food rather than throwing it away.
so I think that video demonstrates that, you know, from the beginning, you've been really actively working with other organizations. This hasn't been all about you or all about your the organizations that you founded. It's been about collaborating with others. Can you talk a little bit about that process and how you got different actors involved?
Yeah. I'll steal your mic. Yeah, the organization that I've eventually founded, Feedback, is almost an afterthought. You know, for years we were doing this campaign without having any organization. It was just movement building. So it takes me back to 2009. That's actually the second Feeding the 5,000 event that we did in London. It was in 2011. But the first one, 2009, I'd just written my book. I kind of wanted to get out of the library and do something a bit more fun and bring this message to life. I'd put all the arguments and the data into, you know, 350, God knows how many pages in my book, and I wanted to take that message to a bigger audience. And so I had this idea of doing a Feeding the 5,000. I'd always done a bit of dumpster diving and feeding, you know, the odd kind of group or journalist, but this was a way of scaling that up and a way of inviting all of the organizations that were involved in food recovery or food waste awareness, and a whole load of organizations who hadn't even got it on their agenda. People like Friends of the Earth had never gone near food waste, and I just thought, well, there's something in food waste for aid organizations, for development organizations, for human rights organizations, for environmental organizations, and for food recovery organizations. There's something in it for religious leaders. You probably didn't recognize him, but that was the Bishop of London talking on the stage, and, you know, a whole bunch of other things, and of course local governments. And why don't we just kind of bring everyone together and have a massive feast and take this message to the people? And obviously, by doing that, you've got the 5,000 people that come to the event. They're not really the audience, they're the spectacle, and the audience are really the enormous audiences that you reach through the media when you do something with a big splash. And I just intended that to be a one-off event. It was in December 2009. But we did get a lot of media coverage, and within weeks, the UK government Minister for Food and Agriculture had written to all the supermarkets saying, we want you to start donating your food rather than disposing of it. This was quite a novel idea back then in the United Kingdom, in contrast, obviously, to here in the USA, where it's been always much more established. The supermarkets started changing their policies on ugly fruit and vegetables and on food donations. The situation just completely changed. Public awareness shot up, and everyone that I'd brought together, not an organization, but the people, just said, come on, Tristram, we're not going to stop there. And sure enough, it's taken over my life. We've done this in 40-plus cities around the world now, and helped to really galvanize the global movement on food waste. Shelley Pingree gave a flippant and frankly embarrassing answer to the question that I, in good faith, asked her yesterday. Hugs on disunited kingdom are very welcome, but, you know, the answer, as I see it, to the question that I posed, which is why has it happened so quickly in the USA? I mean, we have launched food waste movements in so many countries, and it has been incredibly rapid, the way in which this has been picked up. But in the US, I've never seen anything like it. Why? Well, firstly, you have a food recovery movement that has already been very well established thanks to strong legislative support and the culture in this country. So you've got this massive network. They have stepped up to the plate in terms of joining up with all of these other stakeholders in an incredibly powerful way, taking ownership of not just the food recovery piece, but the whole kind of why we shouldn't waste food in the bigger picture. And then on the other hand, you've got these very strong and well-informed environmental organizations. Dana is obviously, you know, at the pinnacle of that with the NRDC's kind of strength, but others, many others, Center for Biological Diversity are moving into this space, Sustainable America, etc. So you've got these very powerful players, and the willingness of them to come together and use that power to take the message to the people, I think, is what lies behind this kind of sudden spike. So Feeding the 5,000 as a way of kind of articulating that, it's the kind of fluffy, delicious, joyful, celebratory part of those messages. And it's a great way of engaging. You saw some of the top UK chefs there, engaging chefs in that fun and fluffy and delicious set of the solutions. And sure enough, in the United Kingdom, we had Jamie Oliver, we've had Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, who you probably haven't heard of, but he's like number 2, and BBC Channel 4 News really picked up this issue, and that's when you start getting the ability and the power, not just to share the message amongst the public, but to confront the industry. For sure, the industry has done a lot of good things over the years, and we should applaud them for that. But I think we've got to the situation now where it is clear that wasting food on the scale that is still being wasted, not just in our homes, but in the supply chains, is totally unacceptable. And it's not a matter of just incrementally picking up the odd banana. Across the board, big businesses have a direct responsibility to us, the public, and a direct responsibility to the planet to live up to what is, I think, a universally accepted idea that wasting food on this scale, when we're destroying the planet and in which 1 billion hungry people exist, is totally unacceptable. The bar is up here. And so getting that power, getting that galvanizing energy behind this message is a way of then going to the industry and saying, we're seeing change on the part of the public, mass behavior change on a significant scale. It is time for you to step up to the plate. And that, I think, has been a very, very powerful way of pushing change in the industry. Great. Date labels. We've got great legislative initiatives going on in the USA. Feedback has decided that alongside that, and in support of that, what we want to see, first and foremost from the US food industry, is for them, quite irrespective of whether or not they get forced to by legislation, to come together and agree to standardize their date labels. There are absolutely no barriers to doing that right away. It is frankly absurd. In all my years of campaigning, I've never seen something so ridiculous that common terminology has not been agreed. Imagine if I went to a gas station and I couldn't decide whether it was gasoline or diesel because everyone was using different, and I filled my, it would be so stupid, and that is what we have with date labels. So we're going to launch a petition with Change.org and Huffington Post in a couple of weeks. I would really like any individual or organization who wants to support that petition and share it through your social networks to come and sign a piece of paper with your email address, and I'll send out the information just before we launch it. That would be really helpful. I think it's a great way of challenging the industry and also doing that educational piece, reaching out to the public. Look, they have to be aware that these date labels are completely defunct and there's something that they need to do about it. So I'll stop there because Danny's going to kick me otherwise. But there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I do think it's such a shame that Tristram can't tell us how he really feels about anything. I'm gonna turn back to Jesse for a minute. This is probably a difficult question to answer, but I'd really like to hear some about the who was missing when ReFED started, and how you sort of got people involved. Who were you surprised by? I don't want you to name names, but were there some major players when the initiative first started that you were surprised that they said no or didn't want to get involved, and did they come on board later? Was it a hard process to really talk to different funders about this? Did they get it immediately? Just a little bit more about how that all came about would be great.
I think there probably are three components of what needed to come together for the ReFED roadmap to be successful. The first was funding. And so the first thing that we needed to do, and it was mostly Sarah and I, was going around and talking to various different funders. Betsy and I, through our foundation, have been funding a wide assortment of environmental groups for the last 15 years. And we have a lot of friends. And so we went to our friends mostly in the climate world, because we were looking at food waste as an issue for, as all of you know, the climate issue. So we first went to the climate funders, and it was amazing that they actually were not aware that food waste was a huge issue. And then when we made them aware, they said, well, that's really cool, but we're not going to invest or fund this project. And that actually gave me the incentive to get this done, because they then became the audience. We said, we got to get this report done so that we could put it on the laps of climate funders who have huge budgets, who really should be thinking about food waste as a sector next to forestry or deforestation and energy efficiency and everything else. So that was a real surprise. Since then, we actually, and I think because of the fact that it has gained a lot of interest, we are now getting inbound phone calls from climate funders. The funders who really were early days took the risk with us were funders who were very interested in sustainable agriculture and mostly smaller family foundations who were looking at a regional basis. And so they were busy funding sustainable agriculture and food hubs and things related to that, and realized, just as Betsy and I realized, that if you're really focused on an agricultural system, how could you not be focused on the 40% of the food that never gets eaten? And so we were very fortunate to have a group of funders, a few who are in the room here today, who took the risk with us early on. On the business side, to really make it successful, we needed to create this advisory council, this multi-stakeholder advisory council. And most people who we approached were very interested, and I think Dana made a lot of introductions, and the people in this room made a lot of introductions. The challenge we had is that in some businesses, there wasn't the right person who would stay involved in the advisory council. That food waste in some organizations, there isn't a person. It touches various different people, and actually that's one of the challenges in getting corporations to pay attention to it. And so we had to navigate our way through, and at times there was a handoff from one person to another person till we actually found a person, and it may not have even been fully their responsibility, but they were just so engaged in the solutions that they stepped up to the plate to make it happen.
Thank you. That's insightful. Dana, I want to sort of ask a similar question. NRDC is this, great environmental organization. How have you approached others to work in this? I know you've worked with Emily and others, but what's that process like when you're a researcher sort of in the weeds of this issue and trying to find other collaborators? Has it been an easy process for you? Has it been something you find very difficult? Do you like it?
So I don't know how many of you have seen the report that kind of got us into this back in 2012, but when we wrote that, our goal was to get 5 media hits. And it it got a lot more, right? Nothing was happening on August 23rd, 2012 or something like that, but it kind of just took off in the media. And we weren't really working on the topic at the time. I had been raging around NRDC for 2 years going, we need to work on this. And finally they're like, okay, go write a report. But we didn't have any work happening, right? And when it got all that press attention, all of a sudden, the phone was ringing off the hook. And there were so many different entities interested in working this. It was like drinking out of a fire hose, and honestly, it's been like that ever since. So I can pretty much say I don't know if I've ever actively reached out to a particular group, because it's been overwhelming how many different interested groups there are, and it's like a fascinating range. Everything from these 2 guys who were electrical engineers working in solar who wanted to reinvent the refrigerator, and companies, and the California Association of Health Inspectors who wants to work on this, and there's just so many different parties, and it's phenomenal because, as Tristram said, this issue speaks to so many different people in different ways, and the faith community, a lot of churches have reached out. So it really has a lot of dimensions to it, and I think there's something in it for everyone, right? But that's made it a very unifying issue for a lot of people. And what I will say is that there are groups that are really untraditional allies for us, and I think in some ways it's sort of the bipartisan nature of it all.
Absolutely. And maybe both you and Jesse can answer this question. I mean, collaboration's not easy. Partnership is not easy. Engaging with a lot of different funders and a lot of different businesses and all of these different NGOs and others who are really into this issue is hard, and it's hard to keep track of everyone. How do you both sort of balance that? How do you do that?
Well, I'll just say it's particularly challenging when your organization in other fronts is maybe unfriendly with the people you're trying to collaborate with. So there's that. But I think, ultimately you just, I think for me in that situation, we've really just tried to put the alternative issues aside, agree that okay, there's other people in our organizations who disagree on those things, and, but for this particular issue, we're aligned, and we don't have to be best friends on everything to be allies on this.
Sure.
I think what I would say is that we put a lot of skin in the game. And so when we showed up, first, having a family farm and understanding what it's like to grow the food, and being sad when your food is being thrown out in various different ways, and then being a funder and being an investor. So it wasn't like there was a self-interest that when we were in the room, whoever we were in the room with, we could hug because we were one of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone felt threatened by either us or the team that was putting ReFed together. And then having really just a fantastic steering committee and advisory council, that group just created this larger welcoming.
I think that's such a great point, because I feel like as someone who, looks at this issue very broadly, I don't feel like there's as much competition among the organizations who are working on food loss and food waste as there are in sort of other aspects of the food movement and the environmental movement. And it's very refreshing, because I mean, this room is a testament to that. A lot of people who want to work together, who don't have, a lot of ego in the game, are really coming together, and I think that's phenomenal and speaks to the force of this issue. Tristram, I want to turn to you now. So Jesse talked about the difficulty of finding the right person at a company often, and you talked about sort of this moral imperative that corporations need to have to take on and really solve food waste in their businesses. How do you find that right person? How do you convince them? How would you go, to give advice to the folks here about engaging with, difficult players and companies that might not want to take this on publicly or even, in private?
So right in the early days, back in the early 2000s, when I started campaigning on this, none of the supermarkets that I was campaigning for change from had a food waste person, and they didn't have any public policies on it that you could refer to. In my experience, it is by creating that and amplifying that public outcry, you will find those corporations will start putting somebody in a position where they have that responsibility and actively approaching you. I have never gone knocking on the door of one of the big supermarkets. They have always come to us and said, okay, we realize this is a problem. Our customers are not happy with the situation. We're coming up with a food waste strategy. Will you come in and challenge us and tell us whether we're doing enough and what we're not doing? And time again, that is how our most powerful impacts in terms of supermarket policy has arisen. So I think we just should focus on not making it an option not to have that person who is responsible for food waste in these companies. And there is very strong evidence that that is happening pretty quickly as a result of this concerted, collaborative effort. And I'd like to say, one of the really amazing kind of self-organizing things about this movement in the US is that you have got these different organizations adopting these very different roles, the good cop and the bad cop, to put it bluntly, but, a more complex array of on a spectrum of different organizations. And I think that is a really, really strong recipe for getting that engagement and getting those policies to change. But I think it's great. I think one of the things that we do need to keep doing, and it is evidently happening, is continuing to innovate, because the other partner in all of this is the press. You respond, you're talking about that gush of press, and that's how it happens. But you've got to keep reinventing the ideas and repackaging them so as to keep that press and keep that momentum. My own latest initiative was to form a totally different kind of partnership from one that I'd ever imagined, and that was we're now making craft beer out of waste bread. It's called Toast Ale, obviously. And, we're now being approached by brewers all over the world and food waste activists all over the world that see this as a way of getting the message out about food waste and its delicious solutions. A food waste solution you can get wasted on is a pretty good message. Do you use that term in this country? And also a way of generating revenue. 100% of the profits of Toast Ale go to Feedback, the charity. So coming to the States, which, by the way, is very largely thanks to the Rockefeller Foundation's funding of Feedback for this year, has just provided us the opportunity to come in, listen, hear, and just add our voice and energy and try to help amplify this amazing, incredibly strong movement, which is a real honor and privilege to sit here and be part of.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to questions from the audience in just a minute, but I want to ask you all the same question. And, I go to a lot of conferences, and I know we all do. As I look out at this room, I feel like there's a lot of diversity missing, and that's something that's evident really across the environmental and food movement. So I'd love for you all to talk about, who are we not engaging? How can we engage better with different communities who are working on this issue? And why haven't we on food waste and food loss? Why hasn't that happened yet? I don't know who wants to take it first. Yeah.
I think that, you've got a point there, Danny, in terms of this room, but just having been to a number of different, particularly in DC, where we did Feeding the 5,000 there and have done Disco Soup, I have been really amazed, particularly in that city, maybe. By the diversity and the real variety. We had this event, we had Secretary of Vilsack, Gina McCarthy, Shelley Pingree. We had a bunch of homeless people, loads of them, grassroots organizers. It was real cross-section, and everyone was eating together and sharing that message together. And I think to a large extent that was probably thanks to DC Central Kitchen and their incredible outreach through all of these diverse communities and Capital Area Food Bank. And it is that's the food recovery organizations in this country are so tapped into all of those different communities. And that is incredibly powerful and is, I think, what I was trying to refer to at the beginning about why it's taken off here. We have a public mandate that does reach into all of these diverse communities. And one of the things that I kind of hope for this movement is that we can use that public mandate, that very, very diverse set of people who are interested in one way or another in this issue, to not just tackle the issue of food waste and hunger in kind of these small solutions, but to see the bigger picture, which is that we are up against a food system that is not designed principally to feed people. It is designed to make profit at the expense of the environment, and indeed very often at the expense of public health, ironically. And this food waste movement is a way of confronting that environmentally destructive tendency, the destruction of forests, the exploitation of finite water resources, a way of saying this system and the idea that the solution to world hunger is to go out and do more of the same, doubling food production by 2050, is bonkers. And if you want evidence for that, go and look in the trash cans across the USA. And so while we do our community food recovery and feeding programs and environmental audits and the rest of it, keeping an eye on there is a global system out there that we are collectively able to challenge.
I don't know if we need to add anything there, but I'll just take a little bit of a different tact, and that is that, I think on the issue of food waste, there's like some high-level thinking needed, but I actually think a lot of it comes down to details, right, and just daily habits and activities. And employees in the food sector are an extremely diverse range of people in a lot of different, on different scales of diversity. And I think that we need to put more focus on talking to employees of the food industry and engaging them and enlisting them on this, because time and time again you hear that when a business puts a program in place to address food waste, the employees feel good about it. It bothers them more than anyone that this food gets thrown out, because they're watching it happen. And oftentimes, farm workers in California are food insecure, and yet they're out there picking fresh vegetables and then going home with none of them and not being able to get to a store or buy that stuff. So throughout the food system, you look at the employees, and a lot of them are food insecure, and whether or not they are the hands that we need paying attention to wasting less food. And so I think a focus on that is important for a variety of reasons and would also serve the diversity issue.
I'm glad that my panelists didn't use my answer. I didn't have a backup. I think the diversity, in addition to both of those, is political diversity. The most surprising thing for me with what happened after we launched ReFed was the reception that we received down in Congress, and that all of us received down in Congress, and that food waste, and sorry, Doug, I still keep using food waste, but wasted food really is a bipartisan issue. And so getting that bipartisan buy-in and the diversity really is what's going, at least in this country, I think we talk so much about policy, it's what's going to move things along from Washington. And when we went and spent a day and a half talking to the various members in the Ag Committee, and they each spent probably a half hour with us, we realized that it means a lot to each person, each House member in their region, whether they're in Arkansas, Louisiana, state of Washington, upstate New York. They all had a story to tell about growing up, and what their grandmother told. Many of them were farmers and ranchers and knew how challenging it is to make money just with food and then to see it being wasted. So there really is an opportunity to pull it all together. And just as we think about what are the hot buttons to really understand the diversity of our elected constituents and make sure that there's an inclusiveness in the solutions.
Excellent point. I'd like to open it up. I know people have a lot of questions. So what I'll do is maybe take 2 or 3 questions at a time, give the panel a chance to answer them, and then we'll keep moving on. I think we have 20 or so minutes for questions. So I think there's a roving microphone, right? I'm going to start with this young lady right there.
Hi everyone. I just want to say thank you first for your inspiring ideas and the videos. And going off Dana's ideas on social food justice and human rights, I was just wondering if any of your work kind of using, like, creating social media campaign to address the problem around, like, farmers workers to restaurant workers, and then to people who involved with food packaging and food delivering, and then to inform the public of reducing food waste. So just curious about if you ever use any social media campaign or any other form of campaign to inform the public on the human rights and people who work back at the stage. And I think that's really important.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. We'll take two more. You right there.
I have a.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm relatively new to this aspect of food waste, and what I'm curious about, because I come a little bit from the outside, is one, how successful it seems to be within the current framing of the problem. But the current framing of the problem seems to actually kind of bifurcate the issue between who can save the food and who's receiving the food. And I think it addresses a little bit perhaps diversity, but it also is why isn't this about feeding people? Or how do you actually ramp up that's not a political goal. It's impossible to have that as a political goal, which is the sad news. The good news is that this is an incredible way to back into the humanistic goal, but one, can that issue be reframed? And two, I think there's another elephant in the room, and that's the fact that the feeding side depends on a lot of free labor and volunteer work. And in fact, there are opportunities within that aspect of this to provide additional services, training, and participation by different communities and different aspects of communities. And I wonder how that is that on the radar, or how that is addressed, or how that will be addressed moving forward.
There's a lot of questions in there, so we'll try to unpack them. If everyone can, and I'm not calling you out, sir, but if everyone could keep their questions maybe to 30 seconds and ask actual questions so that we can take as many as possible. Yes, you right there.
I have a mic right here.
Oh, great, perfect.
So my question next on that, it's about how do you in the bifurcation also bring folks into the leadership? Because I think in every movement in our country, you look around and the leaders are often white. And so how do we not have it be like they're going to tell us what they need, but how do you bring people into that decision-making leadership? Because I think that might be part of how you solve some of that bifurcation.
Great. Okay, let's give them a chance to answer. So, sorry. Let's give them a chance to answer, and then we'll take some more questions. So the first question, I think these questions are pretty related. The first question was about human rights and including farm workers, restaurant workers, delivery folks, other folks who are part of this conversation. How can we include them more? And then this question about how do you bring diversity into leadership? How do you bring together the folks who are saving food and receiving it to work more closely together? So I don't know you want to take that first?
Sure. So I think in terms of social media and framing the issue around human rights, one thing we tried to bring in our campaign, if you saw it on the thing, is wasting food wastes everything, including all the labor that goes into it. And so I do think there's an opportunity on that side of things to really, talking about what a waste it is to waste food gives you an opportunity to talk about everything it takes, to really highlight for people everything it takes to get food to the table, including all of the work behind that. And kind of the juxtaposition that some people do and don't have food. So I think that type of framing can work. And on the questions that you asked, sir, I think feeding people, like how do we involve recipients of food donations in this? I think there are some amazing models out there already. DC Central Kitchen, of course, was a pioneer in that sense of really employing people and doing job training as part of the food recovery process. And I'm seeing a lot of interest in replicating that. Dana Fraz, I don't know if you're still here, but she just last week in the corner launched the Alameda Kitchen, replicating that model. And so it's expanding, and I think there's a lot of others who are trying to do that as well.
Great. Do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think this was a great bunch of questions, and the answer is, as far as our work, feedback has been concerned, the answer is yes. Last year, well, I'll go back a few years. We've been doing overseas supply chain investigations, so looking at the supply chains of the supermarkets in Europe and now also in America, another piece of work that Rockefeller are funding us to do. And what we have gone and done is look at these farmers, for example, in Kenya, who are farming 1 to 2 acres each, growing produce to export to our supermarkets, to the richest people in the world, essentially. And owing to the supermarket buying policies, such as cancelling orders, amending forecasts, and indeed the cosmetic standards themselves, these farmers are wasting up to half of their food. We went and filmed farmers destroying entire crops because orders were cancelled. These people are on an average wage of less than $2 a day, and when an order is cancelled, they're on half wages or less. They told us on camera that they couldn't feed their family, they couldn't send their kids to school, they were at risk of losing their... These are the people least able to bear the risk in our markets, and yet they are bearing the entire risk of our vagaries and our consumer kind of unreliability. There is always going to be risk, but they are not the ones that should be bearing it. We launched a petition, it's called a campaign called Stop Dumping. It's on our website if you want to read more about it. We got 1 million people signing our petition to put into place a legislative framework that we passed in the United Kingdom that is precisely centered on the rights of farmers to be protected from this kind of what's called unfair trading practice. We passed that law in the UK in 2013. Supermarkets are no longer allowed to cancel an order or amend a forecast with the result that a supplier is landed with the entire cost of that. If they do so, they can be fined up to 1% of their turnover, which is colossal in terms of having a preemptive impact. We have just had a massive victory in the European Parliament, of which my country is no longer going to be a part, probably. But 600 votes to 47. Why? Because we stacked precisely food waste and its environmental impacts with that human rights angle. When we took this to companies like Carrefour on a food waste agenda, they said, okay, this violates our human rights conduct code. We, as a result of this meeting, have to go and send our third-party auditor to audit our supply chains to address this problem. So absolutely, this kind of coalescence of different issues, incredibly powerful as a campaign tool and very effective in driving change. That, again, is an alliance issue. I'm going to stop there because I've probably got too much to say, and Daniel kick me again.
Jesse, do you want to?
I think I'm going to just try to answer your pieces of your question. When we often talk about what's the message and who's the messenger, and I've spent a lot of time down in DC over the last couple of months, and it's new for me doing that, and so I'm actually now one of the messengers, as we all are. And so going down to DC, knowing that the issues, the message would include food insecurity, economic development, and environmental issues. That's when we work to solve these problems, we affect all of that. So trying to stay on message. After 2 or 3 of visits in Congress, it was clear that food insecurity and feeding the hungry is the most important thing. And so I felt my response to your question was, does anyone care about that aspect of it? And I actually do think that people truly care, that if you're a congressperson or a senator, that the most important thing is to try to keep the health and food for your constituents. And so getting that message out is important, and the clarity of that. And they're genuinely concerned. How they want to handle it may be different, and that's where I early on said that just really trying to understand where they come from. The second part of my response, which may not be to a question you asked, but I felt like it was going to be, is getting leadership from corporations. And that's where it hasn't really happened yet at the highest level here in the country. And some people may think differently. I mean, we're starting to hear some things, which is great, where Starbucks is working with Feeding America and some other companies doing. But I think that's what we need more of, where CEOs will step out and say, this is really an important issue, and get behind it at the CEO level.
I want to press you a little bit on that, though. How do we go about forcing these corporations to change then on the CEO level? What kind of resources do they need to make that decision to do it?
Yeah, I think that was part of the attempt of what we were trying to do with the roadmap, was to prove an economic analysis of it, to explain that there's a lot of dollars. I mean, we all know it, that's why we're here, but a lot of dollars that are lost in the 40% of food that's not being served to humans. And there's profit potential in recapturing that all along the way, from the farm to throughout the distribution and supply chain to retailers and to restaurants. So taking the message and being able, we started doing this, and we hope that people will take it and run with it, giving concrete solutions and examples. And I think it was a Monday of this week, there was this great entrepreneur day, and you had all wonderful entrepreneurs from the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector. And what needs to happen is those concepts need to be successful. What Daily Table is doing needs to be successful so that it can be held out and we can see that there are for-profit solutions and nonprofit solutions that people can get behind.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, let's go. Thank you. Let's go to this side of the room and get 3 more questions.
Thanks for all your work. So I'm curious, what would be possible if we took on the really hard, unsexy job of filling measurement gaps identified in ReFed and reconciling national data sets to understand what's being wasted that could have been eaten, where is it being wasted, and why is it being wasted? And alternatively, what would be possible if that kind of measurement were promoted as an intervention across the supply chain?
Yeah.
Great. Where else? Where's the microphone? Great. I think there's someone here in the front, right here.
Hi there. I was wondering what your thoughts are on some sort of centralized portal where people who are interested in this issue could go, that might lead them to all these different organizations and initiatives, because I know there's just an overwhelming amount of information right now. And I think for the average layperson not necessarily involved in this on a professional level, it's like, where do I begin? And there's so many resources out there. I know I'm learning about so many more that I wasn't familiar with, and I'm working in the field. EPA has tons of resources, and I'm just trying to think of how we could collectively put all these resources, maybe not in one spot, but in some sort of central area where people could go to access them.
Great, great. Okay, one more question. Yes. Yeah.
So feeding the 5,000 is just an amazing concept. I had never heard of it before. But I am wondering, and in all your talking, your focus is on the supply chain and industry and the supermarkets. But here in the States, I don't know about Britain, consumer waste is a huge part of it. And I'm wondering if you could adapt, what your thoughts would be on adapting all your great work with a little bit more slant towards raising awareness among consumers.
Great. Do you want to just take that first, and then we'll move?
In fact, I've got one answer to...
to everything?
To everything. Yeah. No, but to touch on the corporate engagement and that side of things. So it's not at all just about supply chain. It is precisely by empowering people to realize that this starts in their kitchen, but it doesn't end there, and say, yeah, we've got to reduce food waste in our homes. Our pledge is, I'm going to reduce my own food waste, and I want businesses to do the same. And at these events, we have chefs who are doing cooking demonstrations. We bring along school children. It is precisely about mobilizing people with those small things that everyone can do, and then taking it further. I'm not going to go into the data on food waste in the homes relative to the supply chain. I will just say that this tends to be an exaggerated overweighting. So there's a whole load of, I'm not going to go there, but no one's even measured food waste on farms, which brings me to Ashley's point about measurement across the supply chain and cause attribution to those sources of food waste, and to that question about how you get corporates to take ownership of this. I was in Aspen over the weekend at the Ideas Festival, and I bumped into Walter Robb, who's the CEO of Whole Foods. And he said, I've just come from the Consumer Goods Forum conference, and David Lewis, who's the CEO of Tesco, which is one of the world's 5 biggest supermarkets and the UK's biggest by a long way, and he was challenging all of us to start measuring and publishing transparently our food waste data. Tesco adopted that policy because we challenged them to do that a few years ago with the idea that if we get Tesco to do it, no one wants to be beaten by this discount supermarket in terms of kind of sustainability and CSR, and others will feel compelled to match that kind of measure. Now, they have measured food waste not just in their stores, but right the way up through selected supply chains up to their farmers. Measured it and are now, massively reducing it. So I better stop there, but do you see what I'm getting at? Is that I think these are all part of the same piece, and it does start with public mobilization, and it ends up with CEOs of these big supermarkets competing with each other to be the least wasteful, and doing measurement, and that being itself absolutely an intervention in its own right, actually, as you quite rightly pointed out.
Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think to Tristan's point a little bit, the reason that we launched the Save the Food campaign is that we felt like, yes, consumers are a big part of the problem, and we want to go out there and arm them with inspiration and information to reduce waste in their own lives, but also so that we could start to shift, seed a shift in the cultural paradigm around wasting food in this country, so that businesses can operate in an environment where it's okay to run out of things, where they don't have to serve such big portions, and they're not getting evaluated for that, where there's kind of expectations are adjusted so that it's expected that businesses will, and it's expected and accepted, right, that businesses will do things a little bit differently, and that will lead to less food waste. So it's kind of helping and driving a reduction in food waste in the supply chain, while also aiming directly at consumers' kitchens. To the question on the coordination hub type of website where you can find more information, I'll just say that people are working on something like that, so stay tuned. Elise, can I say?
You're saying you can talk about it.
I can talk about it? Why don't you stand up and talk about it?
Yeah, great. Good.
So my EPA colleagues should stand up as well. So I'm Elise Golan. I'm from the Department of Agriculture, the Office of the Chief Economist. And I've been hearing since I've arrived here about that we really need a central portal. We need a way to keep this wonderful conversation going. We need a way to share our best practices, to talk about our successes and our failures, and how we create this wonderful community. We all know that this is an all-hands-on-deck effort. And here we all are here today, gathered on deck to do this great effort. And USDA and EPA are proud to say that we're joining with some of the major actors in this room to form a public-private partnership to create this National Virtual Resource Center. Of course, once the marketers get a hold of that, it won't be the National Virtual Resource Center. It'll be something much jazzier, punchier than that. But I want to tell you who's joined this public-private partnership to give you a notion of the great collaborative effort that this is. We have the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, Feeding America, Food Marketing Institute, the Grocery Manufacturers Association, the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy, the National Consumers League, National Restaurant Association, National Natural Resources Defense Council, Sustainable America, U.S. Department of Agriculture, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the World Resource Institute, and the World Wildlife Fund. So we are joining together. We've heard this call loud and clear that we need a way to share what's happening in this country. We need a way to pull together all these voices, and we look forward to launching this National Virtual Resource Center before the end of the year. So thank you.
So you'll be able to go there.
Just I want to give you a chance.
Yeah, I'll just answer real quick, and maybe really on the data question. We all did the best we could to get the data to create the ReFed report, but in the process of doing that, we recognize that there really is a lot of area where there isn't data. And so part of the report and the recommendations are the areas where we think further research should be done. And one area is on farm loss, and we were surprised from the work that we did that the number was higher than what had been said before, and we think it's probably even higher still. So looking at on-farm loss by crop type and by geography, and there's a need for a lot more data, but we just have to make sure that we're just not only waiting for data, that we really then have to take the data and really come up with concrete solutions and test and try things and fail and try again and eventually get to the solutions. And that's what, I mean, it's just so amazing of all the innovation that's in this room at a local level, from gleaning and food banks and pantries and all different aspects of that.
Can I just add one more thing to that? And that's, you know, I'm a scientist. I love data, right? I would love like perfect data on this, and we're spending time thinking about that at NRDC and trying to work on it. But I will say this issue is fraught with unmeasurable progress, and that's okay. You know, at some point you just have to be okay, and you know it when you see it, even if you can't measure it. So to Jesse's point, like, yes, let's measure, and let's measure to manage, and it can help, you know, businesses find efficiencies and all of that. But at the same time, like, just getting out there and doing things, you'll know it's working.
That's great. Thank you. I want to end by touching on something that Elise said. You know, we talk a lot about bringing together people to discuss the successes, but you mentioned really learning from the failures as well. And I think this portal that you're putting together, it's really important that we learn from what didn't work as well, and that we're not always sort of touting, okay, here's the best example. It's good to know what doesn't work. So I just want to remind you all of that as you're learning from all of the folks in this room today. Thank you again to our panelists. This was a great conversation, and thanks to the organizers.